Welcome to the digital mammal lecture. Here we go. So, class Mammalia, we are now at the most complex organisms that we have classified. So we've been through all of them up to this point. We've talked about sponges at the beginning of the year and the jellyfish, so the porifera, Cnidaria. Went to the flatworms. We've talked about roundworms, earthworms. Moved to the mollusks and the arthropods and got more complexity in their body systems. And then we moved now to the chordates this last semester, and we've been talking about fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and now we're to the mammals. So what makes the mammals so complex or more complex than the others? In terms of complexity in their body systems, they're very similar to birds in a lot of ways. So I would say that the birds are right there in complexity. But we'll learn a little bit more about what makes mammals more complex than any of the others. So, not as large of a group. There's about 6,500 species of mammals. So if you talk about the numbers, the fish were so much larger. Birds were still even larger. I mean, when you talk, there's only about 50,000 or so species of chordates. This is only about a fifth of them, less than that. So mammals don't make up a very large number of the species of the world. So when you think about all the mammals that we know of, a lot of times they're larger in size, but that doesn't make them, the most diverse. So we just have larger species. So you got some really big ones like the African elephant, the Asian elephant, blue whales, killer whales. So some of the whales are obviously pretty large. Horses, kind of bigger creatures, giraffes. So you look at the birds, and there are no birds that are getting to that size. The largest bird we have maybe has a 10-foot wingspan, something like that. But to put it in perspective, these are kind of the animals that we're most familiar with, because when you go to a zoo, you see a lot of mammals. They do have areas where they'll have some turtles, or they'll have some alligators or fish and things like that. But this is what people usually go for. So this is what most people are excited about. So there's about 29 different orders of mammals. We're not going to cover all of them. In fact, we're not even going to cover many of the orders. We're going to talk about them and split them into three groups, but they're just kind of unique offshoots. They're called subclasses. Okay, so there's 29 orders of mammals. There's about 270 that are in the carnivora species. That's going to be your wolves, cats, things like that. Anything that's a straight carnivore. Bears. Actually, those are the Ursid went, so that scratch that one, not the bears. Cetacean. These are your water, your marine mammals. These are like your whales and your dolphins and things like that. And then the largest one of the group is the rodentia species, your rodents. So the smallest one we have is a bumblebee bat. It's about 29 millimeters. And the largest is the blue whale, get up to about 98 feet. So pretty big difference. We're talking the bumblebee bat is really small. Blue whale wouldn't even fit in this room. So pretty big group. The subclasses that we're going to be talking about is the monotremes, which are called the Prototheria. And then you have the Metatheria, which is the marsupials. And you have the Eutheria, which is the placentals. So this right here, the monotreme, a duckbill platypus, is an example of that. Another word for monotreme is the egg layers. Okay, so these ones, they lay eggs instead of having live birth. Okay, then you have the Metatheria, which are the marsupials. These are the ones that have young that are very, they have babies that are really, really small, and they develop inside of the pouch of the mother instead of being born and being out in the open. Okay, and then you have the placentals, which I'll talk about that in a second. It means that they actually have, they develop the young in the womb, and they develop them for a long time. Usually a longer gestation period is what it's called. And that's where then the babies are born. So like for humans, we have a 9-month gestation period where you're inside your mom and you're fed through the placenta. It's an organ. So we'll talk about that in more detail. So the monotremes, egg layers, that's the term right here. Those that are oviparous, that's the egg layers. Okay, so the platypus is an egg layer. So there's this thing called an echidna, and they have the spiny anteaters. So here's the kind of the group. They're really small. There's only 6 species. I think one of them might be extinct now, but anyway. So you have the platypus, and then you have the echidnas and the spiny anteater. These ones all right here are the egg layers. Okay, so they're the only mammals that actually lay eggs. So they're more bird-like, more reptile-like that way, but they have all the other characteristics of mammals in terms of they're warm-blooded, they have fur, they have the larger brains. I mean, they're just more mammal-like than any other creature. They just happen to lay eggs. Okay, they're the most primitive of the mammals, which also kind of goes along with the fact that you see them as an intermediate kind of group. Then you have the metatheria. These are the marsupials. Okay, this one right here is an extinct marsupial. I think it was name was the marsupial lion. But ones that we have now today, you have things like the wombat, the numbat, the sugar glider, the red kangaroo, wallabies. There's more here. Koalas. The opossum is the only North American marsupial. So we only have one up here. The rest of them are down mostly in like areas like Australia. They're viviparous, which means that they have live birth, but they have a small gestation period. So the baby, when it's born, will have to get put into the womb, into the pouch, so that they can develop the rest of the way until they can get to the point where they can come out and live. So they're really, really small when they're born, very underdeveloped. They're not able to do anything at that point. So they might only have like a 1 week or 2 week gestation period. So they might only be pregnant for a week or two, and then they have the baby, and then it goes into the pouch, and then it will live in the pouch and stay there for a while. That's where they spend most of their time developing. Then you have the true placental animals. So the placenta is the only regenerating organ. When I say that, you can lose it and then you grow a new one each time you're pregnant. So for the females, whenever they get pregnant, they develop a new placenta. That placenta is an organ that when the mom eats food, some of that nutrition will go into the placenta, and that's how the baby gets its food, is from the placenta. So the mama creates the placenta, and inside the womb, the placenta gets the nutrition, the food, and then that placenta will then be attached to the umbilical cord of the baby, and they will get their nutrition from the placenta. So it goes from the bloodstream of the mom, so she digests it, goes into the bloodstream, she uses some, and some of it gets stored in the placenta where the baby can access it. So this is one of the animals that have true placentas. It's all other mammals, okay? The largest group of them are placentals. They're known to be kind of the more intelligent creatures. They have very advanced brains. They have long gestation periods. I think one of the longest is the African elephant that has like a 22-month gestation period. That means the mom's pregnant for 22 months. You're going to see what they call heterodont dentition, which means that they're going to have lots of different types of teeth, where some of these other ones didn't have teeth. They're very, very specific teeth. These ones right here are going to have different types of teeth. So we're talking incisors, canines, molars, premolars. They're different and they're specialized for different things. Our molars do something different than our incisors do and our canines. So heterodont dentition, that just literally means different teeth or different tooth types of teeth. Okay, so we have different types of teeth in their mouth, and I'll show you that again as well. So let's look at some of these orders, things that you might want to choose when you're looking for your animals. primates. Okay, there's a ton of different types of primates you can choose from, lemurs to the great apes. All these creatures are going to be in that same order, where they're going to be talking about large brains, opposable thumbs, usually on both hands and feet. We are primates, so that's why I say usually, because we don't have the opposable thumb on our feet like the monkeys and gorillas and things like that. So the primates. The pinnipeds, these are your things like walruses and seals, sea lions, things like that. These are ones that mostly are in the water, but they do not live all the time in the water. When they go out to sleep or when they go out to rest, they're going to go and hang out on the shore or on rocks or on beaches, things like that. So the pinnipeds. Then you have things like the ungulates or things with hooves. Okay, the things with hooves. All the mammals that have hooves, those are them. Their hooves are modified toes, basically toes and toenails. So you got the long part of their leg. This is like your lower leg, and then down here, this is your foot. They just end up running on their toes. Cetaceans, again, we talked about them already. Whales, dolphins, things like that. Porpoises. Killer whales, which are not actually whales, they're dolphins. And gray whale, blue whale, humpback whale, things like that. Cetaceans. Chiroptera, these are your bats, the only flying mammals, okay? And they fly differently than birds. And you'll see that if you study them and look at the different types of flight, you'll notice that they fly a little bit differently. All right, let's get to their habitat. These guys are pretty much everywhere. You'll find them up in the tundra. You can find them in urban areas. Raccoons love to hang out in cities and dumpsters and things like that. You find them in marine water. You do find some in freshwater. There are some freshwater mammals that can go in there. There's a dolphin that's a freshwater dolphin. So I didn't put that one in here, but you can highlight all three of them. So terrestrial, freshwater, and marine. But here is a map showing you obviously have a ton of mammal species that you can find in these tropical areas. Tons of mammals, okay? Especially this is where you're going to find most of your monkeys and things like that. Tons of different types of rodents all over the jungles. Okay, so kangaroo mice, woodland mice, different types of rats. And there's just all sorts of rodents all in this area. As you go up further, so this is the desert. You're going to find a little bit less species in these desert areas. Not a lot in the desert area. You can find them along the sides where there's more water available. And as it gets colder, you'll find less species, obviously, because they're warm-blooded. They like the warm climates because it's easier to maintain than being in the really, really cold climates. But you do still find quite a few up in there. I mean, there's mammals all over, okay? In the water, you can also see the same thing. Tropical areas, there's lots of species where the whales are hanging out. Okay, whales and the sea lions and stuff like that. They do travel up further, but you're going to find them in this warmer area, and you're going to find them a lot of times over by coral reefs because that's where you're going to find them in their food source. Symmetry. Again, we've been doing this one for a long time. This shouldn't be new anymore. They have bilateral symmetry because they have a head. You can only split them one way. Okay, you can only draw a line one way and break their bodies up. Okay, so right down the middle, equal left and right sides, bilateral symmetry. They are still part of the same group. So when we split them, the first organization part, they are still eumetozoan, which means they have true tissues. They're triploblastic, having 3 tissue layers, the endoderm, ectoderm, and the mesoderm. And then they are eucoelomates because they have a true body cavity in their body. Now we call them the deuterostomes, just like all the other chordates, because we developed our anus first. Okay, So this opening, when you started developing, you were a ball of cells. Oh, the opening that started, it became your digestive tract. The first thing hole became the anus, and then you developed your mouth later. So the arachnids, so the arthropods, mollusks, annelids were protostomes. They developed a mouth first. Starfish group, the echinoderms, and chordates, fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. All of them are deuterostomes because they have their anus that develops first. It's just an evolutionary trait that helps us to identify what they are. Okay, now let's talk about specific things for the mammals. That's all just the classification stuff. Now let's get into what makes mammals unique. So one, we are known as the synapsids. Okay, so the anapsids were the turtles. Okay, the reptile group that had no hole in their skull. So we have a hole in our skull, this opening. We have one. Birds have two. This whole opening right here in our skull, this little gap, is unique to our group, the mammal group. We have very thick skin with hair. So reptiles had scales made of a very similar substance to our hair. Bird feathers made of a similar substance, just a slight modification. For mammals, they have hair. Now, the next thing, and where we get our name from, why we're the mammals, is because we have mammary glands. That is the milk-producing glands that females have that provide nutrition for their offspring. Okay, so mammary glands. We also have other glands like sebaceous glands. Okay, sebaceous are oil glands. We create oil to help waterproof our skin, lubricate it to keep it from drying out. And then we have scent glands and sudoriferous or sweat glands. Okay, so sweat glands, oil glands, mammary glands, scent glands. We have glandular skin. Okay, so where the and we have glands all over our body, all over our skin. Where the birds didn't have it all over, they had a few glands, and the reptiles didn't have any real glands. There might have been one or two. We have them all over our body. Excuse me. Now, we are all endothermic or warm-blooded. That means we have to maintain our body temperature between a certain range, and we have to do things to help us stay warm. So when we get cold, we shiver to create muscle contractions to create heat. When we get hot, we sweat and pant. Lots of different things. We have been known to have an expanded cerebral cortex. That's the higher order thinking. Okay, we have the ability to think more critically, integrate our senses, create emotions, memories, all those type of things, more complex than any of the other animal groups. And we are still part of the amniote lineage, which means that when you're in the womb, remember we talked about the placenta in there? You're also surrounded by a membrane called the amniotic sac. And there's fluid in there. It keeps you safe. But it also keeps you hydrated so you do not dry out. So the amniotic sac keeps you from drying out. Okay? The digestive system. Let's now dive into all the body systems. Okay? So you have intracellular and extracellular because we are breaking down our food starting in our mouth and in our stomach and in our digestive system in the intestines. We're breaking food down and then we're absorbing it into our bloodstream. And then at each of our organs, we're breaking it down, or in each cell, we're breaking it down again. So that's intracellular and extracellular digestion. We have a complete digestive tract where we have an opening where our mouth is, and we have an opening where our anus is, so a complete tube. Okay, mouth and anus, the whole tube. Our feeding behavior, there's lots that are carnivorous, but we have herbivores, omnivores, insectivores. There's all sorts of them. Pretty much, I would say the majority of them, though, are carnivorous, omnivorous, or herbivorous. So you got herbivores, carnivores, omnivores. Like I said, there are some that are insectivores, but I don't even know if I put that on your paper. You don't find too many of them that are filter feeders. Okay. Parts. So highlight these parts. Okay. So we have the mouth. mouth with different types of teeth in them. The mouth with our tongue is used for swallowing. We have a pharynx, which is this back little tube that leads down into the esophagus. So mouth, pharynx, esophagus, and then from the esophagus, it goes down to our stomach. So in our mouth, though, we start digestion. We do have salivary glands that create enzymes. Specifically, it's called amylase, if you want to know, that breaks down sugar. That's why when you suck on a sucker, or you're eating popcorn, or anything that has sugar-based, you can dissolve it in your mouth because you have enzymes that will break it down in there. So digestion starts in the mouth. So the mouth and the salivary glands inside of your mouth will help break down the food there, pass it from the esophagus where it goes in the stomach, where it will also break it down because there's a bunch of acid in here that helps to churn the food and break it down. And then you go into the small intestine, where the pancreas is going to be putting enzymes into the small intestine. So the pancreas is creating enzymes, the liver is creating enzymes. So the liver is creating bile, putting it into the gallbladder puts it into the small intestine. Pancreas is creating other enzymes that are putting it into the small intestine. It's breaking the food down the rest of the way. And then through the jejunum, the ileum, and the duodenum, between these three parts of the small intestine, you're absorbing the nutrients, and then it passes it from the small intestine to the large intestine, which is called your colon, right? So you have the three different parts of it. You have this part that's going up, then across your body, then down. It is taking up water or adding water to make it lubricated so that when it comes out of your anus, it's ready to go. Okay? So it's not too dry, not too liquidy, and can be excreted easily. So that is your digestive tract. Okay? There are a couple variations. There's this thing called the rumen and the cecum, and you'll find that in certain mammals. I'll show you on a picture on the next slide. But this is just a general overview of the digestive system. Okay, so there's the parts. Now, you should write the rumen and the cecum in on the side of your paper, and I'm going to show you a picture of this right now. Okay, so the rumen, this is where you're going to find a ruminant or a rumen. It's a extra part of the stomach. Okay, so it's where the stomach, there's an extra part, and there's bacteria in here that will actually break down plant material, because most animals can't actually break down plant. Even though these guys are herbivores, they can't do it by themselves. They have bacteria in this first part of their stomach. So these guys, they are going to chew their food, then they're going to put it down in their rumen, then they're going to throw it back up into their mouth and chew it again, and then pass it to the next part of their stomachs. So they might have a couple stomachs. That's what they say. Okay, it's really just parts of it. Okay, and then it goes into the small intestine for absorption, and then it comes out. So these are cud chewers. Then you have ones that have a cecum, so things that are non-cud chewers. Okay, so horses, rabbits, rodents, elephants, things like that, they have a cecum. Okay, these ones here, what they're going to do is they're going to have a small pouch inside, usually at the end of their small intestine, and right before it goes from the small intestine down into the large intestine, they're going to have an area where they break down. They have the bacteria in there that breaks down, so they don't actually eat the food twice. They just chew it, swallow it, goes in their stomach, goes in their small intestine, goes into the cecum, and then they absorb the nutrients. Okay, it helps them break down the plant material, and then they can put it into their colon, their large intestine, basically, and then excrete it out. You'll notice that their intestines and their tract is a little bit different than what ours is. So yeah, and that's why you can't break down plant material like they can. So you guys don't eat grass and things like that and digest it the same way. Anything that's high in fiber, that means that we can't digest it. It's made of cellulose, which is plant material that makes up their green leafy parts. The outer parts is cellulose, so you can't actually absorb that part of it. And so you end up excreting it out where they will digest it, okay? All right, let's get to the circulatory system now. So this is exactly the same as the birds. So they have a closed system. So that means the blood never leaves the arteries, capillaries, or anything like that, or the veins. It stays in there. It just passes through those small tubes and drops off the oxygen and picks up the carbon dioxide as it's passing by. It never leaves the system. If it does leave the system, it means you're bleeding. Okay, so if you get cut and it's open, then that is not good. You're supposed to get that closed up. Okay, so four-chambered heart. So this is something that's common to all warm-blooded animals. Okay, like the birds and the mammals. We are the animals that have four chambers. So remember how the reptiles and the amphibians had three chambers. The reptiles had three chambers with a little partial septum. But we have a full septum in the birds and mammals, so that we can have left and right sides of the heart, and that they can have four full chambers. So the blood comes in, jumps down to this, the ventricle pumps it out, goes to the lungs. So you follow this. The blood comes back to the heart, goes into the atrium, drops down to the ventricle, pumps up to the lung, gets oxygen, comes fully oxygenated back to the heart on the right atrium, or sorry, this is actually the left atrium, goes down to the left ventricle and gets pumped out to the body. So left atrium, left ventricle, out to the body. Right atrium, right ventricle, out to the lungs. Okay, they have a two-loop system, and that's what we're talking about here. The first one, the pulmonary loop, that goes from the heart to the lungs and then back to the heart, and the systemic one that goes from the heart out to the body, back to the lungs. So two loops. They have arteries and veins and capillaries. Arteries take the blood away from the heart. Veins take the blood towards the heart. Capillaries are the site where it drops off the oxygen and picks up the carbon dioxide. Respiratory system. Lungs. We have lungs, air sacs, okay? It's not as complex as the birds were, because the birds had to have air sacs and lungs and a bunch of different things because they're flying and they have to be very efficient. Flying is really hard on their body and it requires a lot of energy, so they have to have a way of being more efficient with their oxygen. With us, we are pretty efficient. Not really. We're only using like 10 to 15% of the air that we breathe in. But how it works is our lungs, these big air sacs, are broken down. You have the trachea, which is the tube that goes from your throat. So right next to the esophagus, you have this rigid, you can actually feel it in your throat. It's the rigid tube that goes down. That's your trachea. Trachea breaks off into two smaller tubes called the bronchi. And then that bronchi breaks off into smaller tubes called bronchioles. And that's, you can see all these little tubes all through here. And all these little tubes make up your lungs. And the bronchioles will actually split off into these little grape-like sacs. It looks like little grapes on a vine. And these are called alveoli. Okay, so when you breathe in, the air is going to come in through the trachea to the bronchi to the bronchioles, and it's going to go into these little air sacs. Well, at these air sacs, all of these alveoli, you can see this is where the capillaries are. So the blood will run right up to these capillaries, and it will drop off the oxygen and pick up the carbon dioxide and then go through the veins back up towards the heart. Okay, so that's how it works. It drops it off at the alveoli. Air passes in the bloodstream so that you have the red blood cells that are taking that oxygen, and they're taking it throughout the body and passing to where it needs to go. This is also how a baby gets its oxygen. So babies don't breathe. They don't use their lungs when they're inside the mom's belly, because they're getting their oxygen from the blood supply that mom gives them. It also goes into the placenta. So not only are they getting the nutrients, but they're getting oxygen from the placenta, from their mom. Okay. Another thing is we have a separation. We actually have a hard, and the roof of your mouth is hard. It's got bone right there. It separates. So you have the mouth and the snout. Okay, your mouth and your nose are separated by a hard palate, so that when you breathe or when you're chewing, you can still breathe through your nose. And then the only time you stop breathing for a second or can't breathe is when you swallow, because then you have a little tube or a little muscle called the epiglottis. It covers the trachea, so no oxygen get in, and then the food will go down the esophagus. And then that epiglottis, when you release from swallowing, will open up, and then the air can go back down the trachea. Okay, so that's how that works. Excretory system. Okay, we've talked about this a bunch. The kidney, it filters the blood. It will take the nitrogen waste, the ammonia. It will take it out of the blood, and it will put it, convert it into urea. Okay, so urea is what we use. So instead of uric acid, like the birds and the reptiles, we use urea. That's also one of the reasons why we lose a lot of water when we urinate, because we make urea, which takes water with it. So the kidney is going to take a lot of water out of our bodies as well. So we lose our water through the kidneys and through the digestive tract and through sweating. So we drink water all the time so that we can continually be filtering it out. It's filtering out some toxins and things like that as well. So the kidneys, they'll take the blood in, they'll filter it out. So that is the kidney that is made up of the ureter. So the kidney, not made up of it, but the kidney then passes it to the ureter. So this is the tube right here that leads from the kidney down to the urinary bladder. So the ureter passes the urine to the urinary bladder where it's stored, and then the urethra is where the bladder pushes it out of the body. Okay, so there's your excretory system. Sometimes it's called the renal system. All right, the reproductive system. Okay, this one, pretty simple. They're dioecious. There's males and there's females. Okay, so in the mammal world, you'll have male and females that will, the males will pass sperm to the females, and the females will get pregnant. So if it's a monotreme or the egg layers, then they'll lay an egg. If it's a marsupial, they'll give birth to the baby at a really early stage and then develop it in the pouch. And if it's the placentals, they'll raise it in their belly for a long time. Now, we do see this as well where you have altricial and precocial babies. So you'll have some that are completely helpless. Like humans, when you're born, you are helpless. You are absolutely helpless. Little babies, they have no coordination. They couldn't feed themselves. They couldn't walk. It usually takes a little while for them to learn that, okay? Then you have precocial ones, things like horses and wildebeest. When they're born, they're walking almost immediately, okay? They stand up and they start walking. So it just depends on the creature, okay? Monotremes lay eggs, marsupials, viviparous, have live birth. So we've used these terms a lot. So we have oviparous, viviparous, ovoviviparous. So oviparous means lay eggs. Viviparous means that they have live birth. Okay, so we are viviparous. The marsupials are viviparous. We just have a little time where we develop them and they put them in a pouch, where the placentals have internal development. And you're also going to see the menstrual cycles. So ovulation cycles, okay? So that's the reproductive system. It's pretty self-explanatory. You have to pass the sperm from the male to the female. The female will get pregnant, and inside of the womb will develop the baby, usually through placental ways or through the marsupial or egg laying. All right, your nervous system. This is where we are so much more complex. So our optic tectum, this is our eyesight, very well developed. The medulla oblongata, this is this part right here that's the blue, connects to the brainstem. This is where we can have all of our reflexes, okay? Coordinate our involuntary things like breathing, digestion, it's all coordinated through there. Our cerebellum, which is our coordination and balance, is very, very developed. Birds is very, very developed. Mammals very developed. So if you look at this, amphibians, fish, reptiles, okay, they are not as coordinated. That's not as developed as the birds and mammals. And ours, you can see, is even more folded over and complex than any of the others. Okay, so we're going to see a lot of this coordination happening. Then you have the cerebrum. This is where things get crazy. This right here, the cerebellum, or sorry, the cerebrum, okay, the cerebral cortex. This right here is our part of higher order thinking, okay? Notice how much bigger this is than any of the others, okay? This isn't even our brain, okay? Our brain's here. This whole part right here that's much larger. So look at this. Here's a mouse, cat, dog, chimpanzee. This is a rhesus monkey, okay? Chimpanzee and the human. Look how many folds are in that brain, how much more complex that one is. We have the most complex brain of any of the creatures. So you can see, this also has this shows it right here, dolphin, chimpanzee, human. Very, very, very folded brain, lots of surface area for lots of making connections and memories and emotions and all sorts of things. So this is your high order thinking, our ability to rationalize, think, problem solve. That all happens here. Okay, so the optic tectum, we still see very well. The medulla, the olfactory. So this this first part is the olfactory. This is our sense of smell. Okay, so very well developed still. Our senses. Now this is where things get a little bit. I mean, for us humans, we have the main 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, sense of smell, sight, touch, taste, and hearing. So we use our hearing a lot more because we communicate more than any other creature. Okay, birds communicate, mammals communicate. We talk. Okay, we vocalize. Touch. We have this ability to touch and sense things through our hands and our body. We can feel when things are touching us. We have the sense of touch. Some animals, like cats and stuff like that, have whiskers. They can also sense. They can actually touch things with their whiskers and sense them as well. Our optic, so our vision, we use this as still our primary sight, our primary sense. We see in color. Some animals don't. And some animals have night vision. They can see it in the dark. So, yeah. Olfaction, our sense of smell. We use it a lot, okay? More than birds do. Obviously, we have some animals that have really good sense of smells, like dogs and bears and stuff like that. That's why dogs, you can get them to be like diabetes dogs, where they can smell the sugar in your blood. They have that good a sense of smell. Bears can do the same thing. They have very strong sense of smell. So they use the olfaction a lot. That's smell. Optic, that's sight. Touch, hearing, the auditory, we use it a lot. Taste. Some animals can sense heat. Some mammals do have heat sensors. Some have magnetoreception, so they can sense the magnetic pole of the earth. And then we have this new one, echolocation, that bats and dolphins and whales use, where they can actually send out sounds and it clicks out, and when it bounces off something, comes back, then they can actually basically create an image in their brain of what they're seeing. So they send out the sound, and through this sound, when it comes back, they can sense it and make a visual picture of it in their brain. All right, the integumentary system. This is where we differ a little bit from some of the other animals because of our glands. So our skin is used to protect us. So this top layer, you see it's dark purple right there? That right there is your protection layer. Okay, so if those get kind of damaged a little bit, we're okay. But if you get down further where you get to the blood supply, that's when it starts to hurt and bleed and stuff like that. So this top layer, it can get scraped a little bit, and that's why you can do things all the time. You're losing skin cells all the time when you rub up against things, and it's just that top layer that it's okay. You make more of it all the time. You're creating new layers of that all the time. In fact, you're almost every 7 days, you have a whole new layer of that top skin. Okay, so it's protecting you from mechanical injury. So if something hits it, microorganisms, it's a barrier blocking them. So they have to, the only way to get in is through your nose, mouth, or an open cut. And so through your nose and your mouth, that's where you get sick. That's why when people sneeze and you breathe it in. Think about it. Why do we wear masks? Well, because it's not going through our skin. It's going through the areas that have blood supply very readily. Okay, so you get it through your nose and your mouth. That's where you get most of your diseases. Okay, UV light, your sun or your skin, this upper layer protects you against the sun. If the sun were to touch this underside layer, it would just fry it. So the skin is a protective layer from light. We also have things that help us with temperature regulation. So see this word down here, the erector pili, it's a muscle. This muscle will actually make the hair stand up. Okay, so when we are cold, our hair will stand up so that we can get direct sunlight on it to warm it up. Okay, the muscle will make the hair stand up for that purpose. Okay, we have it for sensory. Our hairs can sense things. Also, we have sensory receptors on our skin, so when something touches it, we can feel it. We can excrete it through our sweat glands. Okay, we have sweat glands, these sudoriferous glands that will create sweat and release it out of our pores so that we can release toxins and water. Yeah, and because of it, our outer layer of skin, they die often, and so we just always are replacing them. Our hair, some animals, they use the hair to sense the world. Some of it use it for protection, like lions, they have big old manes. But we have hair that helps protect our bodies. Okay, and then the glands, like we talked about, mammary glands. These are the ones that produce milk. Sebaceous glands, that's this one up here. That's the oil glands. It's going to create oil to lubricate the hair and the skin to keep it from drying out. Musk glands, some animals, like skunks, they use it to actually send out scent. We use them for pheromones, where we can send scent out of our skin so that other animals can smell it. So musk glands, and then sudoriferous glands. These are going to be your sweat glands, where we create water. Okay, salt and water that come out of our sweat glands to come out and help us to get rid of our water and keep our bodies temperature regulated. Okay, muscular locomotion, running, flying, swimming, jumping. So the main ones, right? Bats can fly. We got ones that will hop or jump, swimming, and running. Obviously, we can walk and they can crawl and different things like that, but those are the majority of what we have. Skeletal system. Okay, we have calcified bones, claws, nails, and hooves, different things that are unique to this group. We use them for locomotion, offense, defense. Obviously, lions, their claws are used to offense. They can use it for defense as well. The hooves of the ungulates for running are fingernails, but help protect our fingers. So our spinal cord, we have 5 different regions. You have the cervical region, the thoracic region, you have the lumbar region, you have the sacral region, and then you have the tailbone or the tail region. Okay, so then you have heterodont dentition. We talked a little bit about that. So here's pictures of this. You're going to have these incisors up here in the front, canines, premolars, and your molars that are all used for different things. So the incisors are used for like chiseling and cutting things, canines for ripping and puncturing, premolars are for shredding and grinding, and the molars are the flat teeth used for grinding. And the number of teeth and the type of teeth you have depend on your diet. So here's like a rabbit skull. Notice that they have more molars and premolars, and they're flat for grinding the vegetables or the plants that they're eating, and the incisors help to chisel it off. Where if you look at the dog skull, notice that the molars and the premolars are more jagged to help with tearing. So they're going to be shredding the meat with those ones, not grinding it like theirs. Okay. So flat teeth for grinding, or they're going to have shredding teeth for ripping. Canines, the rabbits don't even have canines because they're not tearing or puncturing meat. And then the incisors or incisors for chiseling things, taking little pieces off. Okay, so different types of teeth. You don't see that in other animals. Okay, gators, one type of tooth. Okay, birds, no teeth. So you look at a heterodont dentition that's unique to mammals. Okay, and specifically, each one has a different one. For us, our teeth are different than dogs because we're omnivores. We eat lots of different things. We got canines for puncturing and tearing. Okay, pay attention next time you're eating food. See where you put the food. If you're going to start chewing it and grinding it down, you're going to put it back here in your molars. If you're going to be tearing off pieces of meat and stuff like that, you're going to be shredding it up here. Okay, so pay attention to that. Endocrine glands. Okay, this one, it's so complex. I'm just putting it up here again. You have a lot of glands and they're controlling everything. So your nervous system and your endocrine system work together to control everything that you do. The hormones that go throughout your body to control different things. They're controlling metabolism, they're controlling your sleep, they're controlling your calcium control, they're controlling your fight or flight response, you're controlling your happiness, the dopamine, that's another hormone that's in there. Like you are being controlled by your hormones in your body. So your nervous system is controlling your muscle movements, your voluntary muscle movements, but it's controlling the endocrine glands, telling them to release certain things, and then those endocrine glands are releasing the hormones in certain amounts, and they're controlling the rest of your body. So hormones and nerves are controlling everything, okay? The lymphatic system, this is your defense. It runs right with your circulatory system, so your heart is pumping out blood, but right next to it you have all these lymph vessels that are also holding lots of white blood cells to help protect and fight the body off from diseases. Like I said, the diseases have to get inside of your blood, and that's how they grow and spread. So you have lymphatic vessels, so lymph nodes, lymph vessels that are creating lymph fluid that are working with your entire body, your circulatory system to fight off these viruses that get inside of our blood. So if your digestive system doesn't kill them and they get inside your blood, then your white blood cells have to kill them. Defense adaptations. So there's lots of here. Obviously, our brain is the biggest one. How do we as humans defend ourselves from bigger creatures and from scary creatures? Well, we use our brain to create weapons. We use our brain to outthink them, outsmart them. You hear lots of things. We use our brain to try to do most of our defense, okay? So we run and hide. We think, oh, this guy can't come catch me here, I'll go here. If I look really big, this will scare it away. If I make loud noises, if I do this, if I carry a gun, if I carry a knife, if I carry a bow and arrow, if I carry a spear. These different things are things that our brains created so that we could defend ourselves. So we use weapons. Hair. So a lion, their mane, it's used as a defense, right? So other lions can't bite through and get to their neck very easy. They got to go through a whole thing of hair. Sets a smell like a skunk. Burrowing, digging in dens, having a home to run into. Claws. There's lots of them. Okay, there's lots of them. Quills. The porcupine is protecting himself, saying, "I'm going to stab you in the face." Okay, so there's lots of ways that animals defend themselves. So I think that covers everything. So you can finish off your notes, and that's the last one for this year. If it's not, I'll let you know.